Hello, welcome to our May 6th Planning Board meeting. I'm happy that we gather here after such a long time. And we have, first we'll do a roll call. Can everyone introduce themselves? Starting with Jill and kind of going down.
Jill Wiedrick, Village Planner.
Joseph Burkhart, Planning Board member.
Andy Martin, Planning Board member.
Yana Garansky, Planning Board Chair.
Heather Williams, Planning Board member.
David Cruzy, Planning Board member.
Thank you. And the first thing on the agenda is the approval of meeting minutes. Can we do it separate? Do it separate? Yes. Okay. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes from October 2nd, 2023 meeting?
Motion.
I can second. Everyone in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And then a motion to approve the minutes of the January 10th, 2024 Joint Planning Board and Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Can I have a motion?
A motion.
I can second. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 And David is going to abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, so we have one case today, and that is the site plan approval for 25 Liftbridge Lane East. And if the applicant would like to come up and tell us a little about the proposal.
I'm going to jump ahead,
Oh, go ahead.
and I'm going to do seeker first.
Okay, sorry.
And then, Joel, you
I
can
fell
come
off.
back up.
Thanks. Thank you.
So I've provided the planning board with the part 1 of the short environmental assessment form that was completed by the applicant. And has everyone on the planning board reviewed that document?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So now I'm going to go through the part 2 questions, and as lead agency, you will respond to these. Either no or small impact may occur, or moderate to large impact may occur. The first one, will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulations?
No impact?
Yeah, no impact, I would say.
Okay. Will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of use of land?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area?
Nope.
No
No.
impact?
Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities?
Nope.
Will the proposed action impact existing public-private water supplies and public-private wastewater treatment utilities?
No.
Nope.
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources?
Nope.
No.
Will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems?
No.
Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health?
No.
No.
So based on your responses to the above, you have determined based on the information and analysis and any supporting documentation that the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts.
Correct.
Okay, and now I'll just have you sign this at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
So Joel, now you can come up. And if you could explain your application, and I'm just going to, for the public at home and the public here, this is a signed site plan approval. The address is 25 Liftbridge Lane East. The applicant is Joel Cuminelli, Turning Point Science and Design. The request is to review proposed signage for 25 Liftbridge Lane East and consider final signed site plan approval.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
So I know you have the information here on the packet. I might jump around and give a little bit more background on the project. I'm here with Blair Anderson, the owner of the property tonight. If you have any additional questions that he might be able to help out with. Originally, I visited this site in December of 2020, and that was for a sign for the back building, which I believe may be on the plans that were submitted in here. Okay, they're not. I do have one copy here. This is the sign that is on the back building there. Basically, black background, aluminum composite material with vinyl lettering and a top wooden rail on there. And the tenants that were in there at the point of creating that, I believe, are no longer in there.
2 or 3 of them still.
Okay, so,
There's some different ones now.
so that is something that is part of what brought us to present what we are tonight. That goes back to September of '23 is when I started looking at the site here with the improvements that have been going on. And we already had a tenant. No, sure. There was a tenant, another Chapter bookstore that already had a sign from an existing location that they wanted to integrate into this plan. So that's a little bit more of the background of where some of the information came from. And there is a second tenant going into this front building at 25 Liftbridge Lane East. And that tenant had a logo, but nothing specific for signs, as this is the first retail operation that she's had here. So the first thing we did was to take a look at, and I'm jumping around a little bit here. If you have this sheet, this was the first massing that we did to show different locations that we were considering for the signage on the site. What that involved was a sign over the awning and below the window. At this point, we didn't know what dimensions that area was going to be, so we kind of used just a general massing idea. And then we developed a projecting sign concept, which led to a little bit of confusion because there is a residence entrance most nearly located to where that projecting sign was going to be. So that kind of is what led to the discussion of a directory in place of a projecting sign at the front of the building that might make it confusing for people. And then there was also some initial consideration to do some signage as an option of one of the locations. The signage on the front of the building was going to be another Chapter bookstore, and they were also perhaps going to be using an existing sign again along the side of the building. But then that also created a little bit of a situation where we weren't certain it was going to be the most effective use of the space to identify a business that's on the front of the building. So that was kind of the first stage. Along with that stage was the concept of doing a directory sign, and it was originally thought to be positioned along the property line near the fence on the other side. And I spoke to Jill about that, and it was kind of thought that that probably isn't a great location for that type of sign because of the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with the existing property on the opposite side of that line. So again, we moved on from that, and that is where we now catch up to the correct paperwork inside your plans here. And the specifics of this would be another Chapter Bookstore in this. Now, their sign is actually 24 by 84 inches, and to allow for flexibility and to not have to come before this board again to make changes to this plan, we are proposing that it is approved for a 24 by 120, which is a sign that is an appropriate size, we feel, for the space that the building offers at that location. And by the same token, along the side near the entrance to the second tenant's location, there is an area that exists where a sign could also work in that location. However, it couldn't be the same dimensions as the sign out front because there is not 10 feet with which to work in that area. So rather than doing that, we determined that we could do the same size sign basically in the area to allow for that tenant to have the same exposure, at least along that side as the other one. And I think the math comes out. I didn't round the numbers to the specifics on that, but I think it was like a third of an inch or something
It's
less.
19.85.
Yes, okay. So for the sake of the plan, we would like that to be 20 square feet. So then we got to a new location for the directory. Now, what is not shown on here is the intent of adding a bicycle rack that would be to the east of the sign location. In the photographs that are shown with the sign superimposed here, this photograph on top was actually taken from the center of the road at Water Street. It was zoomed in a little bit, but essentially that shows the line of sight from Water Street for that sign in that location. By the same token, it was taken from the center line of the road for the lower example as well. And if we move on from there to continuing with the directory, this example shows the bike rack area and essentially the average height of a bicycle and what that would affect how it would affect the signage. Particularly in the case, I know that there was some concern about having open area at the bottom of the sign. And we felt as though an open area at the bottom of the sign would create another space to lock up a bicycle, which is not really what we're trying to do with the sign. So that's why the design went all the way down so that it doesn't encourage people to lock a bicycle to the sign. And down at the bottom here, you can see a comparison to the cannery sign. This is actually to scale, so you're looking at what the sign would compare to a sign that was approved for the cannery location. The square footage of each tenant panel in this instance, just as a matter of design, I think it's 3.5 square feet at 14 by 36 for the tenants at Liftbridge Lane, and I believe that it was 10 by 43 for each of the tenant panels at the cannery. So they're within reason in terms of what those tenants are. We also had included on the original concept plan 2 additional tenants for the back space who would be in there. There's some changes happening in that space as well, as I understand, so it provides an opportunity to have additional tenants in that space beyond what is there currently. And then there's the letter visibility chart there, and along the left-hand side, it pretty much is just indicating the area of the letter height for the specific lettering for each of the tenant panels on that. And that is another thing that we use to try and base the size of the sign and accurately portray what it's going to look like, as well as how effective it might be for those tenants. By not doing the projecting sign, we felt that the directory sign would allow for tenants to be seen whether traffic or pedestrians are heading either east or west along Liftbridge Lane. So a bit of thought went into the concept of why we're trying to get through it this way. Otherwise, the tenant along the west side has no additional exposure from traffic heading west. So that was part of the intent of placing the directory there. Getting into specifics, on top of this sheet is what the current sign for Another Chapter bookstore. Originally, we thought we may be cutting that panel down, but it looks like the awnings that will be placed now will allow for the same size sign to go there. So that became the impetus to create the entire plan around what this unique size already was. And then you see the adaptation. Now again, this was from another property, and they had a sign site plan in place already because Another Chapter wanted to make use of their existing signs. And at this point, at least, it's only one sign because they have 2, but that was part of the other property. Now they're only asking for the one sign as well as the 2 panels on the directory. But that is essentially pigeonholed the possibility of creating the same type of sign. Now, originally, these signs were, we did do the sign for Another Chapter for the other location. The signs were created to be a faux sandblasted sign. When we presented to them, we did present an actual sandblasted sign as a possibility. Typically, people are not concerned with the techniques of creating that type of signage, and rather, if the budget calls for it, then people will sometimes choose to go with that type of signage. So what we've done for Totally Boards is we created the same design, and upon meeting with Michelle about that, she wasn't crazy about that because it's not really a reflection of her business and what she wanted to do. So it was more an effort on our part to have it fit into an existing site plan. So if you see the addendum sheet, this is essentially what she wants, regardless of what size is allowed to be used in the plan. She actually prefers to have a round sign if she could, simply with her logo on it. She did say that, when we were discussing the options for the signs, she did indicate that she may be more in tune with going with a dimensional sign if she was allowed to have the sign that she actually wants to get, more so than having to match an existing sign from another property. So that's just a little bit more information. And then her second choice is to, again, retain her own color aesthetic, but again, go with the shape that is more indicative of the front sign as a rectangular sign. So I don't know if there's any immediate questions.
I just wanted to say thank you for the in-depth presentation. I think it's extremely helpful when we know the backstory and kind of the process that all of these designs went through. I think it helps us a lot as a board to
Sure.
talk about it. So
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any questions? Do you have questions first? Or just kind of go down the line?
Do we want to, I guess, try to organize the discussion in any way? Do we want to start with the building signs and then move to the directory sign, or vice versa?
Yeah, I think we can do that. That's actually a
And,
great
and
idea.
before you get started with that, Blair, do you have anything you want to add before we?
I guess,
Blair, if you could just come up to the microphone.
I guess the only real comment that I have is that I know that the lady in the second unit is very interested in having a round sign. And actually, I think that frankly fits in between the space that she has available to place it there. And I don't think having it change from a rectangular to circular for two different businesses would cause too much consternation, I would hope.
Can I ask a question? Would the tenant be interested in having it be the same colors as another chapter, just round?
That would be a possibility, I think.
Okay,
This was her preferred design, but she has layers of things that she would be considerate of.
okay. Board, may I ask one more question? Okay. As far as the directory goes, we heard in your presentation that there's a directory attached to Flex 23. So would there be the possibility of just having on the directory tenant 1, tenant 2, and Flex 23 with the assumption that those that are occupying Flex 23 would say, I'm in Flex 23, just look for the signage for Flex 23. So is there the potential that you could go from, I think, from the 5 possible individual signs to maybe 3?
Yeah, we actually discussed that right at the beginning of the meeting, that that would be acceptable.
Okay. Board, you can now ask your questions.
So, wait, follow-up question to that. If we go to 3, then the size of the actual directory signage would be smaller, right? The height of it?
I would think that it could be. To what degree, I don't know.
Well, we don't want to get it so low that nobody can see it. So I'd like to keep it up as high as possible, since there's just 3. And frankly, if there's a gap underneath it, there's other ways to keep bikes from being locked up on there. Like it could become plexiglass. There's a variety of ways. So I'm very open to having it, trying to keep as much height as we can, and it could be an open space underneath in order to mitigate bikes blocking what signs would be there anyway. And I think at least having the Flex 23 up in the front gives some people indication that there are other locations in the back, but at this current time, 95% of those, none of those are intended to be retail at the moment. It's all just businesses that have their offices there and people know the location is there. It's not people driving by and happen to see the sign.
Can Can I jump in one more time? So could it be possible that on the additional information on that page that shows the 6-foot sign, that you could remove that future tenant signage and have that be open?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Back to, do we want to start with the building signage then? Or we kind of had? Yeah, let's do that.
Cool. So on the building sign, did you have any lighting that you had planned there?
We haven't done anything with lighting on the site. I don't know if there's existing lighting or the intent to have goosenecks, perhaps.
So, I guess I should just stand. Although it's good for me to get up and down. So on the architectural plans, there are gooseneck lights. There's lights for illuminating the signage. Those just didn't happen to make it to these call-outs here for some reason. But yes, on the front, there's no plan for any lighting on the side, but I can certainly see that where that might be useful, and I have no issues with adding some lighting there for her to get some lighting
Right.
on her side.
Indirect lighting.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just, normally that's something we also see as part of the sign package, so I think that's something that our,
Yeah, I don't have an updated.
You
this
can
drawing.
condition the approval, if you decide to approve, you can condition on the approval that they may provide gooseneck lighting.
there we go. Thank you. Okay. Is it in the realm of possibility that we could get all the signs to match? So these, new-ish signs, I know one is already existing somewhere that you'd like to just mount up there. But, if I look at what you have now on the Flex 23 building versus, what is being proposed for another chapter versus what our custom charcuterie company would like, to me, those are three different signs, styles. Is it possible to get them all to match?
Can I just, are you talking about getting all the proposed signage to match? Because the Flex 23 signage is not part of the review because it's already existing.
Right, and I think that ties into the pedestal sign, but I'm trying to follow the rules here, so,
Okay.
yeah, so I would like all the signage to match, if possible.
Match being,
Same
Colors?
style, yes, colors, yeah.
um,
I'm okay with, obviously the speech and everything, but logos, whatever, no issues there. So I think, I look at another chapter, I got a brown background with off-white lettering, a green, runner around with a yellow runner around.
So,
then,
again, to point out that part of it, that was part of what the site plan is for the other location.
Right,
So that's where that came from.
right, and I understand that. I guess what I'm trying to nicely say is, could we get a new sign there that matches the other sign that
So,
you're proposing, and?
I'm going to steer you away from dipping into that other approval. And the other thing I do.
No,
wanna-
I'm talking about this, and I'm talking about the directory sign. I'm not talking
Okay.
about what has already been approved, although I will point out that what has already been approved and this, in my perspective, match.
Right.
So to me, this style feels appropriate. That's what I'm trying to
Okay.
allude to. And you're out of questions now. So is that in the realm of possibility?
We're sign manufacturers, yes, it is.
So you like
for
it, I
us.
guess. You're doing a lot of work to the building, and I like what you propose. I don't want to stymie that, but
I don't want to speak for the bookstore, but that's at their cost.
okay. Okay.
If I can add something to that, I think that we've got two different buildings in style. And so perhaps it is acceptable to have two different packages, so to speak. The building for Flex 23 is very different in nature than the building that we're talking about. So I think it's acceptable, from my perspective, it's acceptable to have two different styles with that directory tying those styles together.
Yeah, but not necessarily two different styles on the same building. Those are my words. Okay.
So, just to clarify, the totally board signs that are in the addendum,
Yes,
is that color intended to be black and white?
yes.
Okay. And you can, and just again clarifying before I ask other questions, their preference, the owner's preference there is to have the circular sign and not the rectangular sign.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess where I'm struggling here is, and you know, I'm a little bit more forgiving when it comes to color just in general. And I think that, you know, having a mix of browns and then a black and white sign, that doesn't clash too much to me. I think, you know, from a particular view, having the facade that's facing the street with the rectangular sign for another chapter, and then the facade that's facing the parking with a rectangular sign for totally boards, from an aesthetic standpoint and from a consistency standpoint in terms of size, that makes more sense to me. And particularly for size, because I think that, you know, I would like to see a package that has fairly consistent sign sizes for what's going to be installed and what's going to be approved. So I would prefer that that 24 by 84 to be kind of consistent for both of them. Or I know you said 120 for the one on the front, which
That's part of the plan.
Yeah,
Would be
and-
to allow for the sign to fit within the space.
Yeah.
But
I think
there's
as
restrictions on the
honestly
sign.
as close as possible as they can get to
Yep.
the same size. I think that would be
In this case,
preference for me.
they are proposed
At the same size,
yeah.
which, you know, that to me is great. I think that I understand, you know, another chapter having the desire to just reuse the sign, which was approved previously for the previous location. I totally get that. I think that makes sense, you know, from a business owner standpoint, for sure. But I would like to, you know, to reiterate that if there's some level of either negotiation or getting the two of them to have the same, or as similar side as possible from a size standpoint and from an aesthetic standpoint, I think that would be the most successful thing for the site, personally. So I guess roundabout way of saying, I would prefer you to, you know, to pursue the same size sign of the rectangular fashion and not that circular sign. I see that, you know, why she
That's
might
why
like the circular
was
one.
First, and,
Yeah.
that's directly
It's-
input
it's-
from the
It's just,
customer. in this
it's tough. If we weren't looking at two adjacent facades
Sure.
where there is gonna be some visibility of both signs at the same time, I think it would be a different discussion. Or if we were talking about the buildings separately, I think it'd be different too.
Andy, if I can jump in and ask you a question. So are you saying that you find acceptable the originally proposed signage?
Yes,
Okay.
that's,
One note I would like to make is that the facade on the front is gonna be completely different materials than her location. She's gonna have the existing vinyl siding, and in the front is gonna be the new board and batten siding above the awning.
that's true, yeah. I think I still stand by what I said, but it's a good point to consider.
So would you, the proposal was for maximums for 24 by 120 and 34 by 84, I believe it was.
And however, it has to be
Yeah,
adjusted.
and so do you see that being appropriate, or is your preference to see 24 by 84 regardless?
I think that's close enough in dimensions for, you know, basically what amounts to two rectangular spaces, that is all right. And I do like
And that-
prefer and like that
That
you
is
guys are
what's
showing.
shown on
Yes,
here.
yeah.
These are the proportions in the two different locations.
Yeah.
And essentially, we always work within bounding box, and we try and stay away from shape. So,
That's all I got at this point.
I am also okay with the proposed signage and the sizing of it. And I understand why she wanted to make her sign a circle, right? It goes with the whole charcuterie business logo. And I mean, I feel like there's a place for these kind of signs in the village. I think we're trying to be eclectic and encourage businesses, and at some point, these signs represent the art that goes on within these buildings. And I think, I think I would be okay with this charcuterie sign being like an art piece, not just a circle of vinyl sign, but if it was like a wood piece with a lettering that, I don't know, so some kind of a artsy signage.
Yeah, our first thought was to create an actual charcuterie board for
Yeah, I think
that.
it would be really nice to have something
And whether
like that.
that goes on the background, I think her biggest struggle with it is the background in terms of having to conform to another background. And I get Joe's point about if they can look the same, and I guess I don't know which way that should go, because should they look like a property that's a block away?
Right.
Can I jump in for one
Go
second?
ahead.
So, for the Totally Boards signage, did you guys look at projecting that sign out from that facade, from that western facade?
Originally at the corner, up in the front. There was some consideration of it back towards where her entry is.
Yeah, that's more where I was asking.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever go over that with her, that option?
I don't know, well,
Well, we were a little concerned that it'd have to be up pretty high because there's a pretty high ramp there to get to her deck. Her floor is significantly higher than the floor of the bookstore, which is higher than the parking lot. So it's actually probably about 28 inches higher than the parking lot. So people are gonna be two and a half feet already, and now you put another 6.5, so the bottom of that sign is gonna have to be at least another foot above people. It gets up pretty high.
You mean from the ground up
Yeah,
pretty high?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
true. I guess.
And the other thing that we were looking at originally with the proposed awning along that side that went all the way down the side, that played into the initial concept of not necessarily doing that. The other thing that happens with that is that the projecting sign is great if you can have it two-sided. It's kind of a waste if
For one
you
side.
can't.
Yeah.
Because you're really not gonna see that from, you're going to have less visibility of it from both directions instead of more from one.
Gotcha. Okay. The reason I asked that,
I would love to make the sign though.
yeah, because I think a projecting sign with that circular look, that circular logo, I think if it was projecting out from the building instead of a wall sign attached to the building like another chapter sign, I would feel like that kind of eclectic mix would play a little bit better than both of them, than a circular sign that was a wall sign on the building.
Maybe we can drop the 34 by 84 down
Well-
and create a smaller sign in addition to that.
So that square footage is the total square footage for one or two signs? Is that why you're trying to use it up?
The 34 by 84?
Yeah,
So the 34 by 84 is there because it matches the size of the
Right.
24 by 120.
right.
So that way you don't have to deal with
Right.
tenants saying, why do I
Right.
have a smaller sign than somebody else?
Right.
But if that could be split up into a couple of signs, I think she might actually go for that as well.
And a smaller circular sign would be easier to fit on that awning part. In fact, that could be frankly at the, let's have a design session here, right? That could be right off the awning when it comes out. There's no transition on that front part, and that's facing the parking lot. and she can be kind of creative about that sign. Sure. So, yeah.
I think that's all I had.
Can-
I think that would actually
I'm gonna jump
be
in
great.
again.
Go, what?
It's not your turn.
I know it's not my turn. Because you're bringing up different elements, you could condition the approval on that the applicant may install a sign in a specific location at a specific size.
That would be in reference to the one that we were just shooting around, and I think that that's, you know, that's a good
I'd like to
consideration
have
for
that as
us.
an option for,
Yeah.
if we go with a rectangular.
Okay, well, while Joe and Andy are reviewing that, just remind me, because it's been a minute, the awning that's depicted in this one, that does run down the side of the building, true?
Yes.
Okay, that continues like around the corner and down the
Yes.
length of the building, all right. And what color is the awning?
The awning is going to be black metal.
Okay, and the siding color and the board and batten are what color?
It's a gray color,
And then the goosenecks you're thinking about for lighting are what color?
black.
Okay, and here's where I'm going with this. I wonder if, in the spirit of trying to create a unifying picture on the building, if we should also be considering, are there elements of wood that go with the other chapter bookstore sign? Are there elements of black that go with the Totally Bored sign that could create some type of a visual where those things live together? Like one of my colleagues mentioned that the wood and black together isn't necessarily problematic. It's the signs being disparate from each other. So I'm wondering if there are other unifying elements that would allow each of the business owners to have the sign of their preference, while also making the building seem cohesive. I was remembering that the awning was black, which to me sort of ties in with what the Totally Bored sign wants to be. And so I float that out there. I'm not a designer or design expert, but as I was trying to think conceptually about what we could be doing to unify, that's what was on my mind. With respect to the idea of the circular sign for Totally Boards on the building, I have concerns that as a circular sign, would part of the sign be blocked by the railing?
No.
No, it would be fully above
It would
it?
have to be, since we haven't actually looked at that
Yeah.
possibility in that location, we would have to figure out where that was going to go, what the available size would be. I don't know if it would, we most likely would not be creating within the code, I don't know if it still exists somewhere buried. There used to be a sign size for projecting size.
So here's where the blessing lies with, when you have sign site plan review, there's a portion of the code, I believe it's 408-5, that allows the planning board to waive any requirement found in the sign code if they find that it's not a detriment, obviously, to the health, safety, and welfare of the community.
Well, and that's my point, is that it probably would be if we created the same square footage of signage for that. It would probably be more of a detriment to the welfare.
Right, and so that's why, if the planning board wants to allow for something, they can put parameters on that something and say that it has to look a certain way, and then the applicant can decide whether or not that's going to work for them or not.
On the topic of a sign projecting, I like that idea very much of it projecting near where the door is located on the side. Again, on my theme of trying to create cohesion or unity, I wonder if maybe a projecting sign could be the preferred black sign, whereas something on the building could be that idea you talked about that's a more artistic wood depiction of a charcuterie board. I'm not designing it for you. That would, again, tie potentially into what another chapter has in terms of their wood sign. I float those all as ideas for people to think about.
don't have too much more to add, other than I like the idea that Jill mentioned earlier, that you do have two different styles. You have basically two different facades of the building. So just to quickly touch on the feeling between directory signs and then building signs, is that the directory signs to me bring me in, and then the building signs are what get me very interested in the space and in the experience that I'm looking for. So, yes, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I think everybody that has already spoken has said exactly what's needed. So I certainly appreciate the uniqueness that we want to see on the building out of the signage, and certainly trying to also at the same time reduce the additional cost that some of these tenants might have to outlay. Certainly not wanting to go back and reinvent the wheel when you don't need to.
Can I ask some more questions?
Please.
Okay, if the board were to go in the direction of perhaps putting a maximum sign space, and I'm thinking a little bit out loud here, and allow for tenant two to create a sign within maybe certain parameters, if you laid out that it had to be specific colors, but it didn't matter the shape of the sign as long as it was within a certain box, is that something that could work?
Would
For
this-
tenant two?
Would this be a projecting sign or?
So I guess it could be either, and I ask because I'm not sure where the planning board will land, because we've heard about projecting, we've heard about the desire for the attached signage, but I just wanted to see if that would be something that would allow for some creativity but still put parameters on from the planning board. Is that something you'd be open to?
I certainly would. One of the things that, I mean, I would be fine with things being based on area of signage. More specifically, it's currently the case, I believe, that a single occupied space is allowed to have more than one sign. And originally, the proposal was to do that. We just couldn't figure out how to do it on the building to make it work. But I could see the same being true for even the front tenant space at some point in time, where something could be integrated so that maybe they have a projecting sign and a fascia sign. And just keep it within whatever the volume of area is.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ready to have the conversation about that.
I'm just looking for flexibility for people.
Oh,
that
I
have to
know.
purchase the sign.
I know what you're doing, Joel. So let's talk a little bit further, because I want to have this conversation a little bit with the planning board and also with the applicant. So if we've got a directory sign, and I guess we're going to do a little negotiation potentially. If there's a directory sign here, and the directory sign is bringing people to Flex 23 and also to the two spaces at 25 Lift Bridge. So now we've reduced it to the need for 3 panels on a directory sign. Does the planning board want to talk about the directory sign first, and we can hash that out a little bit? If you're ready to take action on it, or if your preference is to hold, let's talk about that a bit. And I'm going to keep the applicant up here. We won't close the hearing yet so that we can have a discussion, and then at some point we'll close the hearing so that you can really deliberate.
The bookstore's open, correct? Right,
Yes.
they're in there, okay. So certainly, like, I want you to walk out of here tonight, if it was up to me, with at least a building sign, for them. Like, I want to support
They would
them.
love to have one up for the Canal Days.
That's a good goal for us, is to
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
get that, yeah.
I support that.
And I would even say, like, I'm okay with them putting, regardless of what we decide, their existing sign up there temporarily if need be. I think it's strange to have a business and kind of curse them to be there without a sign. I wouldn't want that to be on me. Okay, so that would be something we can get to. directory signage, I'm not a big fan of this. I think it's unique to that street. You know, there's not another one down that street. The line of sight, you know, I think from, if you're headed west, you know, I see your line of sight photo and it's like it's right in front of the building. So I don't think you're getting a lot. And the building further to the east of you projects out further than your building, so it's even harder to see from a distance. So to me, I don't see a ton of value in the directory sign. What I would prefer to see is you take that same directory sign and you mount it to the building where that first, I want to say almost like glass window is there. That's a stairwell there, I believe, right? And that's going to still be a stairwell after your renovation?
The renovation, yeah, that's the entrance to the apartments upstairs.
Yeah, I would prefer that it be mounted to the building there. I think that is more in line with what we've approved on some other buildings, and I think it's more in line with the character of that street. You know, I think between the bike rack and the landscaping and everything that we had kind of considered at site plan approval, this is a bit of a change, and I think it detracts from what we were trying to encourage you to do at that time. So that's what I would rather see. You know, that's something that I would be happy to approve and support. If you need to put more names on there, I think if it's at that location, that's something that I'm open to as well. You know, I think an 8-foot pedestal sign right there, you know, it just, to me, it's not within the character and the style of, you know, that whole street. You'd be the only one, and it'd be a good size. So,
Right. Well, the main concern is Flex 23, the back building is hidden back there. So I kind of wanted something up front to indicate that there's another building in the back, and there could be events in the future in the lower floor of that building, and there's not visually any way to know that that's.
yeah, and I think if you put a directory sign on the front building, on that side of it, I mean, to me, that should be more than sufficient. I don't think you're gonna get a lot of traffic down Parker. You know, I think the majority of traffic that comes to Liftbridge Lane comes down Main Street. You know, so you would see it, it would be on the side of the building. I think you'd actually have even better visibility to it because you wouldn't have the fence, you know, you wouldn't have anything there to block it. You'd have maximum visibility to that. And I think then that could kind of conform with the rest of the building signage. So that's what I would much more like to see. I'm extremely hesitant on approving anything just because it's too unique and it's too large for that street, in my opinion. And
I think we had the discussion of dropping the panel and going with the 6-foot height, though. I think that was something that we had discussed in terms of, that's why it's on this sheet here. So dropping that to 6 feet and then further eliminating the last tenant panel there. And
So
only
to
going
me,
to
that defeats the whole purpose of needing it, because now you're not representing the businesses in the back that you wanted the directory sign for in the first place, right?
Well, the main goal is to get Flex 23 as the destination.
Yes, Flex
So-
23 will be the destination, not the businesses that are back there.
Okay, so could the sign then just say Flex 23 and you get the other tenants right off of it?
It could.
Okay,
So,
That still doesn't solve the problem for the back tenant having any exposure
up on the street, the charcuterie. And to your one comment, Liftbridge Lane isn't done. There are several sites on Liftbridge Lane that need to be redone. And just waiting for the magic moment that somebody already bought the house to decide to tear that down and put up something else. And there's more that can happen on that street. So when you talk about keeping the character, that character's in flux. And maybe this helps define a new character. I mean, there's,
I think we define the character pretty well in our design overlay district, you know? I mean, I hear you, and I listen, I'm very supportive. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I don't want to stymie you, but and maybe this is just me, and you can kick me in the head on the way walking out of here, and I don't mind it. But setting that precedent of, pedestal signs for buildings that are right on the street when we, don't have any right now, to me, that's a kind of a big step for us,
Right. Well, the other thing that's unique about this property is I have a 20-car parking lot. So the directory kind of fits in with kind of a multi-site location that has a parking lot, and there's more than one building. There's more than just the front business. There's other businesses.
Yeah, so, and then maybe that's where I'd like to see something that takes, another chapter and the charcuterie establishment, like, take them off of that and make the sign then for the back building. I could see that.
I'm okay with that. I'm pretty sure that both tenants are very happy with what's going to go on the building. The directory sign, frankly, was for me for Flex 23. And I was adding them just as a courtesy because can't have too much signage from a business perspective.
I get, and I want to help you, I really do.
Right,
I'm struggling with the character, and same as you mentioned, the future and what does that look like,
Is there the possibility that, because if we have another chapter covered in the front, that there could be a sign that's attached to the building that just has Totally Boards and Flex 23 with an arrow?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Joe.
See, we're connected.
Well, that kind of goes back to what we were originally conceptualizing. However, when we do that, if we're talking about projecting the sign, the nearest entrance is like right there.
But not projecting, maybe having it
I think
here.
mounting it like Joe,
Like
the
right here.
location that Joe was just talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about,
Yes, yep, so if you put it there and you had Totally Boards and Flex 23 with an arrow, then you're getting people to that location, because we've got another chapter covered.
true. The only drawback to that is you don't have the west direction covered, but as other members have mentioned, there's not a lot of traffic coming over to Parker Street. There's some,
Unless the bridge is closed.
well,
well, that's the next one to go too.
One other thing to keep in mind for, for a directory sign in that location on a street like Liftbridge, Liftbridge, that's primarily pedestrian traffic. You're going to have very slow-moving vehicle traffic when you have it, and it's a place where people get out, park, and walk. And with that amount of pedestrian traffic, the fewer signs that are geared towards motorists, from my perspective, the better. And I think attaching a sign to the building where Joe had mentioned, kind of solves all the problems here. If we can get something that is showing you that Flex 23 is a space that is there, and also farther back by using an arrow. You can throw the charcuterie place on there as well. I think that kind of is the best solution there, because I do think that even at 6 feet, that still seems not entirely pedestrian friendly from my standpoint. Sorry, Joe, I jumped right in there on you.
And then the outside space that's right next to it with the seating area and a little bit of landscaping is right?
well, there's an issue with that.
I was gonna say that would be like really great.
So we got some ramps, we put the ramps in, but the ramp in the original design ended up dropping the people off in the middle of the driveway, which is probably not good. So we relayed it out with the temporary ramp to bring it along the side of the building and then comes out, so it's shorter. So that area is gonna be relayed out with a new proposed plan for the ramp, because the original ramp doesn't fit in that space, which means now that the ramp is going to use the space that we were going to use to have sort of a benches and landscaping. So now the only thing that there is room for is a bike rack.
So
So can I-
Let's talk about that offline, because that's related to the site plan, and we're gonna need a drawing, and you'll likely have to come back to the planning board to discuss that with them.
Can I ask a question quickly, though, about that ramp in relation to a directory sign in that location? Because as I'm understanding it, if the ramp is going to come down and then extend west to go, to get access around, you could potentially have somebody who's going to be then blocked by the sign as they're coming around to the sidewalk, if they're a pedestrian or a wheeled user of some sort, coming around in front of the sign. Do you see what I'm getting at? Where if somebody's in a vehicle heading west looking for the parking area, and they're turning in as somebody is coming down and having to walk in front of that sign to get to the sidewalk, that to me, that's a safety
That's a
concern
visual
right there.
barrier.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Well,
again, another.
except that they're not going to be in the driveway. It's going to go left, it's going to go, right, wave hands. So let's just say the design that we propose will not put people in wheelchairs in the driveway. So there's no way for anybody to hit anyone because they're not going to.
Right, and that does get back to, waiting to see how it's mapped out on
and-
site plan. But it's another thing that, that just popped in my head. If there's a sign that's, 8 foot or 6 foot there, and there's somebody coming down and they're blocked from any, angle as someone is turning in a vehicle, that's a concern to me.
And I guess I have additional concerns with what we're looking at right now. I mean, what you have before you demonstrates that there's going to be a bike rack and seating, et cetera, and so the board is being asked to review those things as is, and because now I'm hearing that there's going to be changes to that, I think it might be best if we revisit the directory signage at the same time that we're revisiting the site plan changes.
Yes.
Because it sounds like they go hand in hand. So I guess what I'm asking the board, if you're okay with now, is providing feedback to the applicant so that when they come back, they can come back with the portion that's being held, and we can also have a discussion to see how those all fit in together. Because right now what you have before you is not, as we're being told, what will be there. So if the planning board is okay with it, let's think about what we want to see in terms of the directory signage going forward.
I'm good with holding off on the directory signage, and let's just focus on the building. Getting the signs up on the building, and then we'll revisit the directory signage if we even want to go that way, once we finalize the ramp design.
Yeah, I just want the planning board to provide some feedback because you're here and I want to have this discussion so when you come back that we can move on those actions and not have to
let's-
discuss them again. So David, I'm sorry, I stopped you mid-thought.
No, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, ramp design, I totally understand how that can influence this, so that is something very critical.
So,
And I just wanted to point out or ask on this picture, just to, so perhaps we all are understanding correctly, is that the image that's showing the placement of the current or as proposed directory signage, it is showing that ramp, that temporary ramp coming down into the parking lot. Not so much the drive aisle, but you're talking about a ramp design that's more of a switchback, correct?
so I don't know if your picture, let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, you do have, yes, that's exactly, the final design is going to be extremely close.
Or you are,
Yes.
okay.
That's what I thought. That's why I was concerned, because I thought it was the switchback as well, which would not have been as concerning to me from the standpoint that I
So
spoke of.
this shows it coming out towards the driveway, but we're gonna put another turn on it.
Okay.
So that it's coming out that way instead of rolling out into the driveway.
So it would be a switchback.
It's a switchback, but it's closer to the street instead of going back north on the building.
It'll be going in north towards the building. At the final tail end.
Yeah, okay, yep,
That's the safest way.
that is correct,
Nobody's.
correct, and that's, yeah.
I hate to be a stickler for this, but I have to have everybody speak into microphones.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely influences what you can do in that sort of flex space that we had talked about the last time. You know, if you lose a seating area or bench area, I don't think that's as concerning, at least for me, as you know, perhaps having a little landscaping or something like that. Certainly to provide a little more greenery on the site is definitely always desirable. But that's definitely going to influence, especially after hearing at the start of the meeting, that you could potentially go down to 3 tenant placements on this directory sign versus what, you know, the maximum that we were seeing here is at 5. That can definitely change potentially your thinking on whether or not to keep it vertical, if you go that route, separated from the building, or go a horizontal route. And if you go the horizontal route, then, you know, as was mentioned earlier, and it certainly is how it operates today, that street is very slow. I mean, if you're doing 15 or 20 feels fast. And so at that speed, you know, your cone of vision for a driver is definitely going to be a lot more wide open, and you're going to be a little more apt and also not only navigate the road, but also be aware of traffic and pedestrians. So if you had something horizontal, that could certainly be visible well enough from your motor vehicle. And then, of course, from a pedestrian standpoint, that horizontal sign, I mean, as a pedestrian, you're going to be walking by the place anyways. So I'm not as concerned with, you know, the placement there. I think there's less of a concern if you twist it and turn it from being vertical and displaying it for the eastbound, westbound traffic versus having it displayed basically for southbound, or excuse me, having it facing southbound. So I think that's an option to take a look at. It's just placement like that, and potentially how you incorporate that. I think the critical thing to keep is certainly the bike racks, certainly not the seating. I think seating, you know, you could find that around the village, but I think the bike rack is certainly a destination, and it opens up a whole different group and a whole new group of traffic that these businesses will appreciate. So, you know, potentially incorporating that signage, that directory signage, into some sort of bike storage. You know, whether it's bookended by you know, columns or something like that. You know,
That's one of the things that you were going to discuss in terms of the structure of with the fabricator of the bike rack.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Tying that into the structure of
Yeah.
the directory.
Yep. Okay. So I think, yeah, you know, those things, you know, certainly trying understanding that, yeah, you don't want to have the sign become a bike rack. We see that enough around with stop signs and parking signs and
Well,
everything.
even
so.
to that point, if we were dropping down to 3 tenants and having that 6-foot height, I don't think it's going to be a lot of people wanting to go down to that, you know, 12-inch to 16-inch space at the bottom to tie their bike around there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and one of the design options you could also look at is, you know, with the 3 spaces, you're talking 36 inches wide for each of the existing tenant plaques right now. So that equates out to, let's say, 10 feet wide or 10 feet long. How does that width play in? So this way you can get your 3 tenants side by side by side.
You're,
You know-
you're referring to parallel to the road then?
Correct. Yep. Parallel to the road. Yeah. And you know, if anything, that provides certainly a nicer buffer between the sidewalk, the street, and the site to do something behind it.
Would you have that attached to the building?
No.
Oh,
To the
you're,
bike rack.
to the bike rack.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to have that attached. It's certainly not. But you know, site it in an area, and this is something that'll come to, you know, at the next meeting, actually looking at, and you guys will take a look at it, you know, dimensioning from the building and everything. So making sure that, you know, obviously you're meeting clearances and whatnot. So, but yeah, just some design food for thought. Obviously, now that you're potentially being asked to go back to the drawing board. So.
I think I prefer the discussion about it being mounted on the sign on the side of the building with a kind of arrow indicating where the Flex 23 is, and that the charcuterie board shop is down there. I do think there's a need for the charcuterie board shop to have signage up front to make the walking public aware that they're a little bit farther back there. I guess the thing I would just like to plug, understanding that the layout with the seating and stuff may not be feasible in light of the ramp rearrangement, is, to me, this still feels like such a heavily concrete corner that I would still really like to see thoughtful landscaping included. I don't know that you need seating, but the bike rack and landscaping, I think, could just do so much to soften that corner and to make it appealing to everybody. I again, on my theme of uniformity, and I apologize, I'm just going to keep hammering this home. You know, I wonder if the sign on the side that directs you to the buildings in the back could be a way of unifying the charcuterie sign that's black and white and the another chapter sign on the front of the building. Is there a way to incorporate both wood and black and white elements that would
So
be
just
appealing?
to clarify, the sign that is another chapter's sign is not actually a wooden sign. It's a faux sandblasted sign, not a real sandblasted sign.
Understood. Could the hypothetical sign on the side of the building be a faux sandblasted wood sign? Thank you for providing the clarity. Anyway, I wonder, that corner to me in this building where the front is board and batten and the side is vinyl siding, whatever happens at that corner on the lower level seems important to me to tying it and making it feel like a cohesive building. And I think there's an opportunity for that signage and whatever you choose in terms of the design of the bike rack and the design of your landscaping to tie it all together in a way that makes sense.
I agree with all that was said. I support a building-mounted directory sign. I think it really goes more with a pedestrian-oriented, narrower street. I feel like, this is not Main Street, it's not Church Street, it's a little cozier, and I think everything is a little slower, there's more people, and I feel like, building mounted signage would be great in that location. And then, yes, instead of having like an additional wall of signs, I mean, you could do some great landscaping in that area and just make it attractive to walk by or bike by, instead of, drive by, because most people will be walking in this area. And it'll draw them in, right? If you have like great landscaping and an eclectic bookstore, even if it's without all the seating, but it's gonna make a huge difference, I feel. That's all I have. Thank you. We now want to move back to the building signage.
Yeah.
And see how we can tackle that in terms of conditions. I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of opinions in terms of
I'll tell you what I've captured
colors
so far.
and sign.
So what I got out of the conversation that I heard is that if you were to move towards approval, the applicant, it would be on condition that the applicant may provide black gooseneck lighting, and that the signage could be a maximum of 34 inches by 84 inches for tenant 2, and 24 inches by 120 inches for tenant 1. But then I also heard some other things. And so perhaps we want to talk about those other things and explore if you want to open those up as possibilities for the tenant. And it could be that they choose either or, but you're giving them flexibility to make those determinations.
Yeah, and I do think that either or as the decision makes sense. And I think, from what we were talking about when we were talking about the tenant 2 sign, would be that if there was a desire to have that sign projecting above the awning as a circular sign, I think that could be a good alternative to the wall-mounted sign location. So providing that choice between those two options, I think, is good, if depending on what the rest of the board thinks.
What about size for that?
So could that be looked at, I'm not trying to jump in here, but in the past, it used to be that a two-sided sign, for some reason, was considered, twice as big if it was half the size.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of just when we're doing the circular signage, just the max, not necessarily
Well, and that's
caring
to my
about
point. if
the
we go back to
message
that.
on each side. I don't think that we'd measure that, but
Right.
just, so we could say a max of
If it were worded as a maximum
4
of
square
20
feet,
square feet altogether.
a maximum of 4 square feet for the signage where writing can appear on both sides or something like that. So a max of 4 square feet with signage on each side. Because we don't want to say a max of like 8 square feet, because
Right.
then it gets out of control. So if we
Yes.
see something, and I'm not, somebody on the board wordsmith that for me.
Yeah, because I think to the applicant's point, you just want clarity that the dimension of the sign itself doesn't dictate kind of the use of it from either direction. Of course, in a building mounted sign, you're only gonna have the writing on one side. But with a sign that protrudes, you would have writing on both sides. So I
copy
think the
appears on
language
both?
would be that the physical dimensions of the sign would be X. But
And
that
what
the
I'm-
user is able to mark on, or to label both sides.
And what I'm wondering, and again, this requires kind of revisiting the site and scaling things with that. But I think that before it used to be that a projecting sign was allowed to be 9 square feet. And if it were to be up to the size of 9 square feet or 10 square feet, essentially that gives them the same visible area of 20 square feet, where Blair could justify that to the tenant and say, yes, but you have the option of doing both sides of your sign if you'd like.
So a 3 by 3 foot square or circular, whatever that looks like, they're allowed a 9 square foot sign with copy appearing on both sides.
I'm good with that.
And then if that doesn't work out and through your math, you find out we need a different number, we can entertain it then, just let me know and we can amend it. Okay, so, did anybody write down what I said?
I just,
Total of 9 square feet
With copy on both sides.
with copy on both sides. Okay.
and I
Did
I
you
just-
want, oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, David.
That's all right. I just want to clarify where we're talking about with that projection signage. Is that above the awning or below and then towards the back so that obviously you're not banging your head on it as you're walking through?
It's above the awning.
Above, okay. Okay. All right, that's good. And then obviously we make sure that the lighting, if, there is lighting on that, doesn't impact the window there that's, I assume is part of the residence there.
Does the planning board wish that to be circular, or would you be okay if it was a square?
I think we could leave that up to them. I just know that I was talking circular because that was, her design style, right? Was that as that first option in the addendum? But I would be okay with it being square.
Okay.
Yeah, I like,
Me too.
yeah, my opinion is more uniformity on the directory sign, less uniformity on building signage.
I think Yana and I have a clarification, and Andy, maybe it's to your proposal here. The sign above the awning, we've confirmed it's above the awning. Is it on the front corner of the building near the sidewalk, or is it in the back above the tenant's door?
I would say in the back above the tenant's door.
That was my understanding, which would then make sense with, I think, the direction people are headed about a mounted
Exactly.
directory
Well,
sign.
and I think that combined with the directory sign, that's where you'd want it anyways. I wanted to look to you guys to make sure that I heard you correctly because that's what I was thinking.
And then I think that provides some certainty, right? You have from the hypothetical to be presented in the future sign mounted to the building, certainty that that it's somewhere around there. And then you have the protruding sign that gives you certainty about specifically where it is. Yeah, here, it's right under this.
Okay, can I talk conditions again?
One more question. There would not be any lighting associated with that projecting
No,
Well-
there'd be lighting on it.
sign?
Yeah, and I was
How
thinking
would
that it
that-
would be the same, the same gooseneck lighting that we were talking about for the wall mounted signs.
And those can either be attached to a bracket or they could come from the structure.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because Joe had asked me a question about that. Those can, and I'll confirm this with you. This can be done in a way that's not visibly obtrusive from where you're looking. They're going to be hidden and you're going to be looking for what's lit anyways, which is the sign. But there's also some projecting signs on, I think maybe even on Lift Bridge, that they're lit, but you don't really notice where the lighting is unless you're looking for it.
All right, so if you choose to move on this, and we'll close the hearing, but because the applicant, I want them to chime in too, may provide black gooseneck lighting, a max of 24 inches by 120 inches for tenant space 1. For tenant space 2, either a 34 by 84 attached sign or a projecting sign above the awning at the back door of tenant space number 2 for a total of 9 square feet with copy on both sides.
If you could amend that to be 10 square feet on both sides.
Is that okay with the planning board?
It doesn't necessarily have to be that number, and it may not work in each instance, it may not have to. But again, I'm just looking at why does somebody get a sign that's larger potentially than somebody else, if we can say, you've got 2 sides, which total the amount of the other side.
So, I see where you're coming from, Joel, and I really wouldn't want, that's pushing it for a projecting sign for a size. It is set farther back, though, so I think that's a consideration to think of. It's, typically projecting signs are right up on the street. So I'm okay with that, if everybody else is.
We're probably talking about, what, an inch or so?
Yeah.
In the diameter.
It's in diameter. I'm okay with that if everybody else is.
I'm okay with that, and I thought that Andy made a compelling point that it will be farther back and thus justify a slightly larger sign.
Speaks to your sign chart.
All right. We still have to ask for those, thank you. I'm gonna ask that you sit down, please. We've kept you up here a long time. I'm going to ask for anyone that's in support of the application, if they'd like to speak. Anyone in opposition to the application? Does the planning board have any additional questions for the applicant before we close the hearing? Okay, we're gonna close the hearing. We're gonna deliberate. Is there anything additional that the planning board would like to speak to?
Where did we end up with color and,
Yeah, I think that's the only question, is the uniformity in terms of color between the signs. You all know my feelings on this.
no, and I'm with you, so I would happily make a motion, and I also kind of have to go, that all these conditions and the signs have to be uniform. And typically I'd like to see them before I approve them in the
Well,
future.
and I'm increasingly, though, I guess for discussion, I don't know how I feel about this, for discussion. What do people think of the idea of saying you, Totally Boards, can have the black on white, you, another chapter, can have the wood, pretend wood, and leave it up to that sign on the side of the building that we're expecting to see a more complete rendering of to tie it all together?
If I can jump in for a second, please note that the applicant reiterated that there's going to be different building materials. So in some way, those different building materials create two separate spaces. And we have a black metal roof that will essentially tie all of that in. So I think the question becomes, is it as critical because we've got material and color changes to have those signs appear the same?
I think that's well put, Jill. That was what I was driving at when I was asking the questions about the awning and the lighting and the fixtures. And again, I do think there is an opportunity because of the differing materials to try to, at that corner, create some unity. To Joe's concern, if we approved the signs as depicted today and left for the next time the challenge of creating cohesion through the site plan and sign for the corner to these talented and competent folks to come up with something, we'd actually have eyes on what that looks like instead of kind of approving a hypothetical we don't know about today.
Okay, so do you want to say let's say for tenant 2, the signage could look like addendum 2, which is at the back? And for tenant 1,
Or a projecting sign.
yes, but in color.
Just color.
Just color.
Yeah.
And for tenant 1, as proposed.
That is the question I am floating to my colleagues, what people think of that idea, and again, leaving the challenge of unifying for the next day.
I think yours is a good idea, and I think as Jill read it, I'm good with that.
I also think it does help with the problem you identified, Joe, of letting them leave today with some certainty for the businesses that are operating there, that we can use this sign we already paid for. And I'm sure creatively, something that makes everyone feel good about unifying the building can be created.
Read that back to me, what that proposal says exactly.
Okay, so prove on condition that the applicant may provide black gooseneck lighting, that,
No, just the last one.
the last one. Well, let me get to this. Okay, a max of 24 by 120 for tenant 1, and as proposed, the signage and appearance. And then for tenant 2, 34 by 84, total 10 square feet with copy on both sides, above awning, and as just demonstrated in addendum 2. Or I'm sorry, the addendum.
I'm lost.
So,
What are we, I just this
What-
last part.
okay,
I hope
so
we're
what we're
checked.
discussing now is, should this be allowed for tenant 2 as an option, and this be allowed for tenant 2? They can get one or the other. And then this to be approved for tenant 1
In terms of color.
in terms of color.
Okay. So no, I don't think that's congruent with what we've approved in the past. I think what we've approved in the past is, a flip-flop of light and dark if necessary, not something like that.
I just
I-
wonder, Joe, if we're comparing, and this is an evolving opinion I've had over the course of the day, if we're comparing apples and apples. Like, to me, to say the signage in a significantly larger scope, like the Cannery or 75 North, needs consistent uniformity in color, is a little bit different than this building. That's where I'm kind of getting towards, but I'm not sold one way or the other.
And let
One
me-
other thing to be mindful of, Joe, is that the examples that we're thinking of in the past, particularly the Cannery and 75 North Main, all of those signs were along the same facade. So a stark difference in color in those, especially
Not true.
with the
No, there'll be signs on the front of, well, actually, there's signs on multiple facades over there.
I'm talking about for this specific example that we're looking at
I
of this building
Yeah, I hear
versus the Cannery versus 75 North Main.
I hear you. Let's call it a question.
Yeah,
here,
and
you
let
know?
me just address
I
two
know where I
things. So
stand.
just because the board has approved something in the past doesn't set precedents. You're not beholden to approve something. Each application is entertained on its merits. Beyond that, the vote also doesn't have to be unanimous. So if there is a member that feels that they disagree in its entirety, that's okay. So I want to say that too. Are you ready to vote? Do you want me to read those again, or are you good?
Can you read it back?
Yep. Okay, so approval on condition that the applicant that may provide black gooseneck lighting, that the signage for tenant one may be a maximum of 24 inches by 120 inches, and the colors and design as proposed. For tenant two, that they may choose either a 34 by 84 inch attached sign or a projecting sign above the awning, or above the awning near the door. And that sign may be total of 10 square feet with copy on both sides. And their signage may be in color and design as proposed on the addendum. And I'll wordsmith that to sound better than mumbling. But that's essentially what it gets to.
Can I have a motion?
I motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Who's second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, and also, and hold, obviously, on the other items.
Yes.
And I will compose a letter based on the feedback.
Okay, so you, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. You will kind of compile some of the thoughts we had about the additional signage and landscaping and things for some guidance so that they have that ready to go.
Correct, so that they can move forward. Yup.
And then we will see the final site plan with the directory signage.
Correct.
All in one.
Yes.
Okay.
So when the applicant is ready to go with the amendments to the site plan, I will also ask that they provide how the signage fits into those amendments to the site plan so that we can deal with all of it one evening.
Yeah, it would be
great idea.
extremely helpful to see in the like next version, kind of the signage we've already approved, the lighting we've already approved, and you know, some of those finishes that would help me. I'm a visual person.
Yeah, even with like colored elevations or colored renderings. If we can see that, just with the signage.
It's not a requirement. It's a suggestion of what might be helpful.
Okay. So we've taken care of that. So the vote has been, obviously you heard that, approval on condition, and we will hold on the directory signage. And I will provide a letter to you outlining the comments that were made here this evening. So I realize that we have been here a long time, but I just want to mention, because I anticipate that some people are watching, that the zoning code update, the first public meeting will be on May 20th, and that will be at 7 o'clock in the Johanna Perrin Cafetorium. And we also are finalizing the schedule for a week of zoning code update fun. So there will be a mix of open houses. There will also be a potential for walking tours, a presence at the farmers market, and also a virtual meeting. So we're providing lots of opportunity for folks to participate in the process, and there will also be different means to provide your comment. So that will be finalized hopefully this week, and we'll get that word out. But again, on May 20th, will be the first public meeting, and that will be in Johanna Perrin at 7 o'clock.
And Jill, if I could, if any of the members of our community have questions about the schedule or other ways they can reach out to you to engage with the process, how can they reach you?
So they can reach me obviously at my email, jmw@fairportny.com, and they can give me a phone call at 421-3208. And if I've expressed before, just because our hours of operation are 8 to 4 doesn't mean that that's my hours of operation. So if you'd like to talk about the zoning code while going for a run at 5 a.m., I'm interested in that. And we can also go play pickleball at 7 o'clock at night. So however somebody would like to engage about the zoning code update, I think it's important that we provide every opportunity. And so my door is always open because I want to hear what people have to say. Because yes, I am a planner. However, that doesn't mean that I know any more about the community than somebody else does. And people experience the community different ways, and it's important that we get all of that feedback from people that experience it in different ways.
Yeah, well put, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. You rock. Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Motion.
I second.
Aye.